Welcome to Collision, the podcast where we discuss the fun and sometimes complicated collision of real life and trusting God. If you're curious or confused about how to engage the world we live in, we hope our conversation here helps. Now, let's get into this episode of Collision.
Hey, welcome to Collision Podcast. My name is James Johnson. Matt Manning is out of the saddle today, so I brought one of my good buddies, Pastor Chris Amdahl. What's up, Chris?
What's up, James? It's good to be here.
It's good to have you here as well. Yeah, so how's life in this season, man? Summer's almost upon us.
I know. I can't believe it. It feels like we were just getting ready for Christmas, and then here we are, But, my lawn is turning green, and that's good.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. And we're it's like shorts and sweatshirt weather.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I just bought an electric lawnmower. So it's kind of like mowing with Iron Man. Like I put the battery in and it goes, and I don't know if it's going to last a long time, but I'm pretty excited about it.
Very cool. Good.
Yeah. Loving the planet and stuff.
I still have the old fashioned, pull the string one.
I like those.
Running strong. It's going it's 15 years old now, and it's still running like a beast. So.
It's one of the good ones. Yeah, exactly. I love that. Well, hey guys, so today we are looking at the collision of just another messy aspect of the Christian life or life in general. And today we're going to be talking about recovery, kind of the messy place where we all live, right? Like in the 80s, REM had that song, Everybody Hurts, right? And the song kind of made you hurt when you heard it, right? But it had a pretty powerful sentiment, right? That whatever you're going through, that the people in traffic next to you, man, they're going through some crap too, right? And there's a universal aspect to that, and we're going to lean in that together today. And part of the reason why I'm excited to have Chris with us is because Chris is the pastor of care at Crossroads Church. So, Chris, what does that mean? And how long have you been pastor of care, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I've been in this role for the last, 7 or 8 years, I think. And what that looks like is, when we say the term pastoral care. In fact, when I started in this role, when we made this role, a lot of people were confused because they thought what that meant was that my role was to care for the pastors. And so how I answered that was, well, in part, yes, but also in even bigger part is that what that looks like is the pastoral care of the congregation and our staff, including our pastors. And so what does that look like, right? That we all need help. We all need shepherding. We all need people to come alongside when we're hurting, when we're confused, when we're lost in life, when we're struggling in our marriage. Whatever it is. And so my role is really to oversee that type of care here at Crossroads Church. There's a lot of people here. And so I don't have to do it all. I have a great team of volunteers in various different ministries that help do all of the care. But yeah, that's what it looks like. Everything from pastoral counseling to benevolence to our prayer ministry and recovery as well.
That's awesome. So you lean into the messy stuff and on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. And some instances are harder than others. Some are just heart-wrenching. And just this week, I was pulled out of service for a lady who lost her daughter a few days before Mother's Day. Her adult daughter died, and she was just broken and hurting. And so I spent the morning with her, and a lot of weeping, a lot of questions, and just, a lot of heartache. So there's a lot of hurt there, a lot of messiness. And it's those things that, none of us are immune from. Mm-hmm. And it's those things too, that when they happen, they come along with so much other, I don't like to use the term, but I think it's appropriate, like baggage, right? That that can turn into things over the next few years and decades of our lives. Those hurts, those difficult things really can turn into a lot of painful stuff. It can snowball in a lot of bad ways.
Yeah. Well, and it's so easy for us to try to live life and dodge those. And the reality is, I mean, it's like Frogger, right? Like eventually you're gonna get hit, and it's part of life. Matter of fact, this weekend I was having a conversation with my son. He was listening to a sermon online, and he was just taken back at the idea that it's not if the trial comes, it's when the trial comes. And that really resonated with him, like the idea of, so to develop my faith, like it isn't trying to just live a good life that honors God so that I never have to experience that, because even if you're living that way, the trials are going to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I talk to people all the time who have that experience, right? Where whatever it is happens, their nightmare becomes reality, and their first reaction is to start questioning God. Like, what the heck? Like, I've been living for you. I've been going to church. I've been faithful. Like, I've been doing all these things. Why did you let me down? Where were you? And the reality is that none of us are promised that. It's nowhere to be found, and in the Bible. And so yeah, he doesn't promise us that we'll have a life free of pain, but that he promises that he'll be with us. So then what does that look like? I mean, that's the bigger question, is how do we navigate this painful, broken world and life that we're in, knowing that God draws near to the brokenhearted, and comforts us in our pain. So that's a tricky tension to find.
It is. Well, because I think for a lot of us, we tend to think pretty transactionally in all of our relationships, right? Like if you're good to me, I'll be good back to you. And we do that with God as well. Like, I'll jump through your hoops, and my expectation is that you're gonna protect me and kind of allow me to dance through this life and dodge the obstacles. And yet, the older I get, I realize, man, the hardest muscle to exercise is faith. And I think God lets us go through those trials, or what feels like him coming through at the 11th hour, or maybe feels like he didn't come through, right? And he works something inside of us that deep down it's so necessary for our development. But man, it's tough. I mean, what are your feelings of that? And your wife is a trauma nurse, so you guys, I mean, a dinner's got to be fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's one thing when you hear of tragedy in other people's lives or in other parts of the world, you hear about it on the news, but it's a whole different story when it hits close to home. And yeah, it really does bring to surface what we really believe about God in that moment. I mean, I think that's one of the, benefits of pain, is that it really surfaces what we truly believe about things. And then we're able to look at that in an honest way and say, okay, God, here it is. Here's where I'm at. I think of the story of Lazarus' death, and Mary and Martha, his sisters, who were just so ticked off at Jesus. He was a few days late. Lazarus had already been dead for 4 days, and Jesus gets there, and they both, in separate moments, go up to Jesus, and they're like, "Hey, where the heck have you been? If you had been here, my brother would not have died." And just that idea of, God, you let me down, and if you, like, we know better. If you had done this, if you had done that, this wouldn't have happened. And it was just a beautiful, he didn't judge them for that. He didn't rebuke them for that. He didn't tell them to get it together or to, any of that. He received it in grace. And then he brought comfort to them. He empathized with them in their pain. And then he asked the question back to them. He said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even though he dies, will surely live. Do you believe this?" Like, so it's just that opportunity in their pain to kind of analyze, like, what is it that I really believe about God? Not just what I say I believe about God, but what is it that I functionally on a day-to-day basis believe about God? Pain has the ability to bring that up in us.
Yeah, man, that's so good, Chris. Well, and I think of in Romans 8, I think it is where Paul shares about what can separate us from the love of God, and he does this laundry list of all these things, and then the truth is nothing can separate us from His love, but it puts into perspective of you can endure a lot of hardships that God doesn't promise that He's going to free you from, and yet his love, His presence, that He will literally walk with us through all that we walk through. But his presence and His relational care for us is the constant. And it might look like loved ones dying. It might look like marriages that don't come back together, right? So, but that a realization at the end that the thing that you can't lose is the presence and the love of God.
Yep, that's a good promise.
So, well, Chris, so you've been doing pastoral care, for a super long time. I mean, and all the pastors at Crossroads care for people. Chris is just in a really unique position to do more than the rest of us probably, and then also oversee several ministries that actually equip volunteers, lay people with hearts of empathy and care to be able to do that in a practical way, to where everything doesn't require the professional. If we're the professionals, right? Like that God gifts people in the church to be able to care for people in the church and the community. And I just think that's so cool. So one of the ministries that you guys launched just in February is Celebrate Recovery. We call it CR, which is kind of a communal place that this stuff is happening. So you're several months into it. Can you give kind of an overview of kind of what you're seeing, maybe what you're learning through that experience?
Yeah, it's we're off to a great start. I mean, Celebrate Recovery is, in short, it's a Christ-centered recovery program. And the difference between, and it is a 12-step program, but the difference between Celebrate Recovery and, say, like a Alcoholics Anonymous is that CR is designed for anything that's keeping us stuck. And so we have people who are coming that are struggling with anger or overeating or sexual issues, alcohol or drugs. They're struggling with unforgiveness. I mean, a lot of different things that are keeping people stuck. And really what it is, it's designed to be a place for people to come and find community. Mm-hmm. And in that, working the steps, working through the program, finding freedom from the things that are keeping them stuck. And so, man, it's been a beautiful experience so far. We've had people who have been a part of church world for a long, long time. 60 years, 70 years, who are taking the courageous step of walking into the CR because they know they're stuck in some ways. And for the first time, several of them finding freedom that they haven't experienced otherwise. And so it's been a really beautiful community and a beautiful thing. People are coming, they're hungry. People who are coming are not just there to check a box, but they're there because they have a desire, they have a desperation really for help. And that help is in Jesus, and they're finding that help and freedom.
And that's so cool. Well, and just theologically, like I think we believe that when Adam and Eve rejected God, like it sent this cascading effect, like a big bang of pain and suffering throughout humanity, right? And just the belief that that manifests itself differently in every person. I mean, certain things men might be more drawn to, and certain things women, right? But that none of us got out of that wreck unscathed, right? And it's just so cool that, because I think a lot of times when people think about recovery, we think of drugs and alcohol, but the reality is like ongoing bitterness or anger or self-image, or right. I mean, like it manifests itself in so many ways, and some that just kind of float off the radar, but they're just as destructive. And especially when you're talking multiple years of living life, and you're just kind of managing it, not just dealing with it. So is it complicated in a communal setting like that, of just kind of, I mean, I like there's something about meeting with someone and being able to close the door and just opening up and being safe. But when you have a room full of people, that sounds kind of complicated.
Yeah. Great question. We have what we call open share groups every week, and we separate them men and women groups. And those groups are governed by some pretty strict guidelines that we go over every week. And those guidelines, there's 5 of them, but they're designed to create the safety and the atmosphere of people being able to share what they need to share without fear of that getting overshared somewhere else, or rumors being started or whatever. And so, nobody has to share. If in fact people who don't want to share can just pass that night, it's totally fine. But man, there's something deeply healing, therapeutic of being able to voice something in front of other human beings that maybe hasn't been shared before, or maybe it has been shared, but it hasn't been listened to, or even just the rhythm of weekly being able to share with other people what's going on in your world. That's kind of a lost art in today's world. Not a lot of people have listening ears to be able to share what's going on or what's on their mind that week. And so that place is just a beautiful space for people to be able to do that and experience it. And so it is a bit of a, there's some vulnerability there. It's maybe a little scary to say, like, here's what I'm going through, but man, when you can take that step of vulnerability and be real with what's going on, gosh, it can bring about a lot of freedom just in that moment. It can bring about a new sense of freedom. And as we were talking too about some of the hurts and some of the hangups that people have, it made me think, like, there's the obvious ones, right? Like, most of the time when people think of recovery, it's drugs and alcohol, but in CRs worldwide, only 30% of people who come to CR are struggling with substance abuse of some kind. It's the subtle ones that are trickier, right? Like, it's the person who grew up with a emotionally abusive mom or dad, right? And in the back of their heads, they think, I'm never going to be like my dad, or I'm never going to be like my mom. Right there in that moment, you have a hang up. Like, right there, you have a hang up. And now, as much as you think you're free from the effect of your mom or dad, now the rest of your life, until you work through those wounds, the rest of your life, you're stuck on the idea of, I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm not going to be like my dad. Even if that's a good thing in your life, you're still being controlled by that voice, by that, like, giant on your shoulder. And so it's those subtle things, I think, that are trickier to identify. But the reality is that we all have stuff. I mean, we all have stuff that's holding us back, that's causing anxiety, that's tripping us up, that's creating some unhealthy rhythms and habits in our lives. And so, to identify those and then find yourself in a community where it's safe to work through them is a really great thing.
That's so cool. Well, and I love your point about our awareness of that, because in my experience, I mean, there's the big things that I've struggled with for decades, right? That keep resurfacing. But then there's the little things that they seem to pop out of nowhere. And it's that aspect of self-awareness, not that you're always looking to beat yourself up, but spiritually speaking, like when God makes me aware of something, like to really process it and figure out, like, do I need to talk to somebody about this, or is this just a God and me conversation? Like I had one yesterday. So my son Wilson plays baseball in college, and he's a pitcher, and I slept terrible the night before, right? And we went to the game yesterday, and I was just sick to my stomach. And what I realized in the middle of this, I mean, I'm going to watch my son, which is a good thing. But what I realized in the midst of it, one of my hangups is I like to be in control. Mm-hmm. And when you're watching someone you love on the theater of anything in life, mm-hmm. and you're impotent, like I was behind the net and he was on the mound, and there's nothing I can do. And so the last 12 hours, I've just been pondering, like it's out of love, so it's not a bad thing. Mm-mm. But there's something about, you need to let other people be in their arena and fight their battles, and your desire to control and to parent and protect, like there's something unhealthy in that, right? Because you can't do that, mm-hmm. because God is the only one that is sovereign like that. Anyway, so like for me, I mean, it's like it's not necessarily something that I need like pastoral care over, but it was something that God brought it to the surface. And for 12 hours, it was like, man, how do I enjoy watching him play baseball, mm-hmm. when it makes me sick? And it's really because I like to be in control.
Yeah. Well, what you're describing, I think, is one of the most common things people actually come to CR for, is control or codependency. Yeah. We see it, like it's all over the place in marriages, in family relationships, like this deep down need to control, right? Often it looks like, how do I form this question so that I can control the other person's answer, right? Or how do I engage in this argument in a way that I can control this other person's response, right? So like it shows up subtly, but it is connected to like a deep, unhealthy need, right? That when we begin to try to control other people, like that speaks to something in us, that is hurting, that is not where it's supposed to be, and that we can find freedom from that. I mean, like just think about the anxiety that comes when people are stuck trying to control everybody else, right? And it can lead to so many unhealthy rhythms within relationships. I mean, it can lead to enabling, right? I mean, a lot of unhealthy things. Codependency is a big deal, and so yeah, I think you're not alone in that.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, and you and I interacted with there's an app called the Pause app, put out by John Eldridge and a Wild at Heart Ministries, and it's an app on your phone that you just play it and you sit there and it just kind of walks you through. But what I love about that, and what was revolutionary for me, I mean, as a pastor at 25 years as a pastor, but like it opens up every day with, God, I give everyone and everything to you, and that was revolutionary for me, because I realized I kind of like to be God.
Yeah. The idea of benevolent detachment. Yes. It's a super profound practice, spiritual practice, really. And I mean, if we're honest, most of the time we live our lives like, God, I'm just going to give you the difficult ones, but I'm going to hold on to the rest. Totally. Like, I got this, I can do this. And, but the idea of I'm going to give everyone and everything to you, that's a risky prayer.
Yeah.
A courageous prayer.
And yet it's at the center of what Christianity is, right? That Jesus is our Savior and he's our Lord. And if he's your Lord, he's the boss, he's the one in charge, right? He calls the balls and strikes. I mean, whatever language you want to use, it's acknowledging that he's over you. Yeah. And well, Chris, in June, you're going to be doing I think it's a 3-week series on recovery of some aspect. Can you give us a preview of what that looks like and maybe what people can expect as they listen in?
Yeah, I think when it comes to recovery, again, there's a stigma around recovery, right? It's for those people. And if you're not one of those people, then you don't go there, right? But those people are the ones who are really struggling in life, who are probably addicted to some sort of substance, and it's, and for the rest of us, we don't need that. We don't need that kind of recovery. So yeah, this series is designed to hopefully bring down some of those false ideas of what recovery really is. Like I said, I think some of the most profound freedom that I've seen are people who have been in the church for a long time, who've taken the courageous step to walk into CR for the first time, and they're experiencing freedom for the first time in a lot of ways. And so yeah, my goal with this is to a couple of things. One is to try to break down some of the stigma around recovery, that recovery is for everybody. Mm-hmm. And I don't just say that lightly, that every single one of us have things in our lives that are keeping us stuck. And another way to think of it is like, what areas of my life does God want to bring about some deeper freedom? Mm-hmm. Is there something that I don't have freedom over? Is there something that I continue to get frustrated by? Is there something that I keep going back to, that I keep these repeated patterns in my life, in my marriage, in my parenting? Like, what are those things that it's like stubbing your toe on the same corner of the coffee table 100 times, and you never quite know why you keep doing it. So that's one of the ideas behind this series. And then I think another one is, when we see these things that keep us stuck, oftentimes that becomes our focus, right? How do I stop watching porn? How do I stop drinking? How do I stop gambling? Like, how do I stop cussing? How do I stop, controlling my spouse or my children or whatever? Like, how do I stop being angry? And that becomes our focus, right? Yeah. However, when it comes to those things that trip us up, the hard thing is that when that becomes our focus, oftentimes it just continues to control us. The idea, though, is that we follow the trail back, mm-hmm. and we have to look backwards in order to go forward. And what I mean is we have to look at these things that are keeping us stuck and follow it back to, what are the wounds where this surfaced? Like, what are the wounds that happened? For most of us, they happened in childhood. For most of us, they happened at school, on the playground. For most of us, it happened before we were out of high school. Mm-hmm. But they do continue to happen. But for the most part, it's at a young age. And what are those wounds that we've carried into life? And because we're human beings with real emotions, with real needs, when we get wounded, we have to find a way to recoup those losses. Mm-hmm. And that's usually, most of the time, 99% of the time, when we introduce these negative habits into our life. Kind of like back to the example of, I'm wounded by my mom or my dad, so I'm never going to be like them. Mm-hmm. We've just created a hang up that's going to hang us up for the rest of our life until we actually find true healing from those wounds. Then we can actually find true freedom from those hangups that follow. And so we're going to look at that during the series. And then we're going to also look at the idea of, what does it look like to walk in freedom? Yeah. I think a lot of people who have been stuck for a long time, and no matter what it is, we get used to the new normal of being stuck. And we just sort of resign to the fact that this is as good as it's going to get. And I'm just going to have to live out my days like this, kind of dealing with this. And we resign to the fact that that's how it is. But what does it look like to truly walk in freedom? That, you hear stories of people who've been delivered from incredible things. They've experienced freedom from a lot of things, and those are inspiring. But often we don't think, well, that's applicable for me too.
Yeah.
But the reality is that the God who does that for someone else can do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to paint a picture and inspire people, like, don't just resign to the fact that you're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an opportunity for you to walk in freedom. That's why Jesus came to do what he did, was to bring freedom to the captives. And so those parts of my life that are still captive, God wants to free.
Yeah.
And the more that I allow him to do that work, the more freedom I'm going to experience.
And that's so good. That's so good. Well, and it ties in with where this podcast has been in the last several months, where we've talked about the spiritual transformation process and sanctification, right? And this ongoing work that God, in his love, he doesn't leave us where we were, but he invites us to some hard places oftentimes in order to transform us.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 116, where it says, I will experience the goodness of God in the land of the living.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that because I think a lot of people think of Christianity and they think of salvation and like, I'm going to dredge through this world, and then when I'm in heaven, it's going to be right, and all the jerks will get taken care of, right? And it's like, no. God's doing a work in the land of the living. Like here, he wants you to be able to enjoy. I mean, gosh, the freedom that you can experience where baggage that you've been carrying in your backpack, and somebody takes that jug of water out of your backpack that you never were supposed to carry. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, that feels amazing, right? And they're able to hand that off to Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
who ultimately can carry it. Well, I'm excited to go there with you, Chris. It's going to be a great opportunity for our church and our listening community. Hey, and we have a ton of great resources here at Crossroads Church, the podcast, past sermons, all kinds of written things. You can access all those at crossroadsabc.com. Chris, it's been awesome having you here today with us.
Yeah, good conversation.
Yeah, he's a wicked smart guy and a great fly fisherman, by the way. Yeah, he catches like 8 for every other human being's 1. That's legit.
Wow, I don't know about that, but thanks.
So, hey, thanks for listening today, and we'll see you the next time at The Collision.
Thank you for listening to Collision. This podcast is a production of Crossroads Church in Thornton, Colorado. For more excellent content, please visit crossroadsabc.com.